At 82, she still works every day. The reason will make you cry. Every morning at exactly 4:30 a.m., Margaret Wilson's alarm rings. The sound is soft, but she is already awake. At 82 years old, sleep doesn't hold her the way it once did. Years of routine have trained her body like clockwork. She slowly sits up in her small apartment in Ohio, rubs her hands together to warm her stiff fingers, and whispers the same words she has spoken for decades. Thank you for another day. Her apartment is modest. A tiny kitchen. A worn-out couch. Framed photographs covering one wall, her late husband Thomas, her daughter Emily, and a smiling young boy in a graduation cap. That boy is the reason she still works. By 5:15 a.m., Margaret is dressed in her neatly pressed blue diner uniform. Her gray hair is tied into a small bun at the back of her head. She puts on light pink lipstick. A lady must always look presentable, she says. And leaves her apartment with slow but determined steps. The bus driver knows her well. Morning, Miss Margaret, he greets with a smile. Morning, sunshine, she replies. At 6 a.m. sharp, she pushes open the glass door of Rosie's Diner, a small family-owned restaurant she has worked at for 41 years. Most people her age are retired. Some travel the world. Others rest at home with grandchildren visiting on weekends. Margaret carries heavy trays of coffee and pancakes. And she does it without complaint. A life of love and loss. Margaret wasn't always alone. She married Thomas Wilson when she was 22. He worked in construction, she worked part-time at the diner. They built a simple life together. Nothing extravagant, just love, laughter, and Sunday church mornings. They had one daughter, Emily. Emily was bright, ambitious, and kind, just like her father. But life can be painfully unpredictable. When Emily was 32, she was diagnosed with an aggressive illness. Within 2 years, she was gone. Margaret remembers the hospital room, the machines, the silence afterward. But she remembers something else more clearly. Emily grabbing her hand and whispering, "Mom, promise me you'll take care of Daniel." Daniel was only 10 years old when he lost his mother. That day, Margaret made a promise. And Margaret Wilson never breaks a promise. Raising a grandson at 70. At 70 years old, when most people begin slowing down, Margaret began again. She packed up her quiet life and moved Daniel into her small apartment. She attended parent-teacher meetings. She learned how to use a smartphone. She stayed up late helping with homework she barely understood. She worked extra shifts at the diner. Customers would often say, "Margaret, you should retire." She would smile and reply, "I can rest later." What they didn't know was that every tip she earned went into a small savings account labeled Daniel's future. Daniel grew into a hardworking young man. He excelled in school and dreamed of becoming an engineer. The day he received his college acceptance letter, he ran into the diner, tears in his eyes. "Grandma, I got in." Margaret hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with pride. But when she saw the tuition costs, she felt something else. Fear. The savings she had worked so hard to build were not enough. Not even close. The secret she never told. Margaret never told Daniel how worried she was. Instead, she quietly asked her manager for more hours. At 82, she began working 6 days a week. Her hands shook more now when she poured coffee. Her knees ached when she stood too long. But she refused to let anyone see her struggle. One winter morning, she slipped on a patch of ice outside the diner. The cook rushed to help her up. "Margaret, you could have broken a bone." She brushed off her apron. "I'm tougher than I look." But that night, alone in her apartment, she cried. Not because of the pain, but because she feared she might not be strong enough to finish what she started. Still, at 4:30 a.m. the next morning, she got up. Because promises matter. The customer who noticed. There was a regular customer named Jake. He had been coming to Rosie's diner every morning for 5 years. He always sat in booth number 3. Always ordered black coffee and toast. And always watched Margaret. He noticed how carefully she walked. How she sometimes paused to catch her breath. One morning, he gently asked, "Miss Margaret, why do you still work so hard?" She hesitated. Then, for the first time, she told someone the truth. "I'm paying for my grandson's college. He's going to build bridges someday. I just need to build one more for him." Jake didn't say much. But that night, he did something unexpected. A community comes together. Jake posted Margaret's story online. He wrote, "82-year-old waitress working 6 days a week to pay her grandson's tuition. She doesn't want charity. She wants dignity. Let's honor that." Within days, the post spread across the town, then the state, then beyond. Donations began pouring in. $5, $20, $100. People left messages. For strong grandmothers everywhere. For promises kept. For love that never retires. When Margaret arrived at work the following Monday, the diner was unusually full. Her manager called her to the center of the room. Jake stood there holding an envelope. "Miss Margaret," he said softly, "this community believes in you." She opened the envelope. Inside was a check, enough to cover Daniel's remaining tuition, and more. Margaret's hands trembled. Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't work for sympathy," she whispered. "I worked for love." Jake smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve this. The real reason." That evening, Margaret sat with Daniel at their small kitchen table. She told him everything. The extra shifts. The worries. The fall on the ice. Daniel began to cry. "Grandma, you should have told me." She reached across the table and held his hands, now larger than hers. "I made your mother a promise. And I would walk through fire to keep it." Daniel stood up and hugged her tightly. "You already did." He insisted she reduce her hours. For the first time in decades, Margaret agreed. A different kind of wealth. Margaret still works at Rosie's diner. But now, only 3 days a week. Not because she has to. Because she wants to. When customers ask why she hasn't retired yet, she smiles and says, "Work keeps the heart young." But those who know her story understand something deeper. She wasn't working for money. She was working for love. She was working for a promise. She was working because sometimes the strongest people don't look strong at all. Sometimes they look like an 82-year-old woman in a blue uniform, pouring coffee with trembling hands and an unbreakable spirit. And somewhere, in a university classroom, her grandson studies engineering, building the future she sacrificed for. Margaret Wilson may never become famous. She may never travel the world. But she built something far greater than bridges. She built a legacy of love. And that is the reason she still works every day.